As one of the smartest heroes in the entire Marvel universe, Professor X has had as many clever moments in comics as the X-Men have members, which is to say, a whole damn lot. Even with his powers removed, the Psychic has 4 PhDs and a medical doctorate in psychiatry, meaning he's an intellectual heavyweight even without his brain-boosting powers in mind. Combining his telepathic abilities with a considerable intellect and a thirst for knowledge, Charles Xavier is capable of outplanning and outsmarting just about anyone. There are few enemies of the X-Men who haven't bore the brunt of Xavier's acumen, and even fewer who don't regard the telepath as a massive threat due to his cerebral abilities. Not many people could pull off things like faking their death to defeat aliens or one-upping a man while his brains have been scooped out, but when Xavier does it, it's somehow completely unsurprising. With that in mind, I'm Will for What Culture, and here are 10 times Professor X outsmarted everyone. Number 10, faking his death. X-Men 65. In a move that added yet another death to Xavier's considerable collection, X-Men 65 revealed that Professor X had not been killed by Villain Grotesque as the majority of the team thought, but rather the shape-shifting changeling had in his place. The real Charles Xavier had actually been underground for several months, desperately preparing for the impending invasion of Earth planned by the evil alien Xenox. Managing to fool both your enemies and your allies at the same time is no easy feat, and when combined with the fact that Xavier's plan defeats the Xenox, just shows how easily the telepath is capable of thinking 3 steps ahead of anyone else. Number 9, overcoming Mr. Sinister's mind, X-Men Legacy 214. After failing to move his consciousness into the body of Juggernaut, Mr. Sinister decided on an even more stupid plan by attempting to instead take over the body and mind of Charles Xavier. While this plan initially appears to have worked, it drastically underestimates the powers and perseverance of Professor X. When Sinister tries to weaken him by showing him some of the worst moments of the X-Men leader's life, he instead reminds him of exactly how much he's fought against in his life, giving the telepath all the motivation he needs to promptly regain control of his own body. With Sinister having dedicated almost his entire life to try and take over Xavier in this one moment, it's undeniably impressive to see him fought off so well, and an example of Professor X's smarts having a physical impact for once. Number 8, creating Cerebro, X-Men 7. Cerebro is both one of Xavier's smartest creations and one of his most dangerous at the same time. Invented by Xavier in his youth, the machine is designed to detect mutants, allowing the leader and ambassador of the X-Men to find and recruit mutants across the globe. With so many mutants not realizing they have powers until they lose control of them, this device can essentially work as a preventative measure, saving undiscovered mutants from themselves and those around them before anything goes wrong. Furthermore, after the formation of the X-Men, the device has been used almost constantly to track missing or rogue members of the team down, saving the lives of the collective X-Men a countless amount of times. Being able to essentially microchip all your unpredictable mutant children is never a bad move, especially when they're constantly being kidnapped by an endless score of villains. Number 7, stopping someone from existing, Uncanny X-Men 27. After spending years gently taking care of Matthew Malloy, a mutant who was completely unable to control his powers and thus had to have them suppressed by Xavier's abilities, the leader of the X-Men would be visited by Tempus, who would come back in time to warn him that Malloy would continually lose control of his powers after Xavier died, and would be responsible for killing countless numbers of people. And thus Professor X creates the most beautifully sketchy plan in history, having Tempus take him back to the moment that Matthew's parents met, and then using his own mind control powers to prevent the two from ever crossing paths, thus stopping Malloy from ever having existed. It's kind of awful in the sense that Matthew was a real human who was purposefully murdered by Professor X, but while this is true, it's also true that it's a move that basically outsmarts everyone as it takes out an otherwise unstoppable threat. It also prevents any outrage or backlash from other X-Men by doing so in a way they literally have no way of ever knowing, because as far as anyone's aware, Matthew never existed. Number 6, outsmarting Red Skull while a dead brain, Avengers and X-Men Axis number 9. Outsmarting the Red Skull is generally not the hardest thing in the world. Outsmarting the Red Skull while you're dead, however, is significantly more difficult, and also the situation that Professor X finds himself in after the Nazi scoops out his brain to power himself with Xavier's psychic abilities. Charles retains just enough power to project himself into Rogue's dreams, warning her of Skull's impending threats and giving her a full rundown of how to stop the villain. Perhaps even more impressively, it is Xavier who finally undoes all of the bad Red Skull does in the Axis series, taking control of his body in order to team up with Doctor Doom and Scarlet Witch to put the world back to normal. Whatever way you look at it, outsmarting someone from beyond the grave is nothing short of impressive. Number 5. Defeating the Shadow King, Astonishing X-Men Volume 4, 3-6. Having already outsmarted Red Skull from the afterlife, Charles Xavier gets yet another chance to outsmart people from beyond the grave when his spirit is captured by the Shadow King and trapped in the astral plane, where the villain intended to have himself and Xavier fight it out for eternity, using the X-Men as their pawns. Giving Professor X access to his superhero team is never a winning plan though, as Xavier does what he does best and begins to elaborately control each one of the X-Men in question, eventually managing to outdo the Shadow King and take him down before he even fully realizes Charles has begun the fight against him. The whole thing is perhaps the scariest look into Xavier's mind we've had yet. Number 4. Breaking into a government holding cell, Mystique 2. Showing that Professor X saves the day even in comics made to show off other characters, Mystique number 2 sees the telepath single-handedly save Mystique from a secure government holding facility, which isn't bad for a day's work. To add a cherry on top, Xavier also disguises himself as Magneto, which both confuses the guards as to what his powers are, and also means that any witnesses will blame the event on the villain instead, leaving Xavier's secret jailbreak completely untraceable to the man himself. It's so cleverly done and so badass that Mystique is absolutely unable to believe that it is Professor X who has saved her, repeatedly stating that there's no way the X-Men's moral bastion would have done such a thing. This is a reoccurring theme for the series, as Xavier recruits the blue shapeshifter to be a secret agent for him, placing Mystique in a situation where she is suddenly aware of all the cool and slightly shady things that the X-Men's leader is responsible for carrying out. Number 3. Creating the Xavier Protocols, Excalibur 100. Excalibur 100 provided a suitably delightful twist for the series when it revealed the Xavier Protocols, a series of files detailing the most powerful X-Men Xavier had recruited over the years, and his handy notes on how to kill them, should the need ever arise. It's a shady move morally, sure, but it's also the exact kind of thing that genius characters like Xavier and Batman prepare for in order to ensure that they always have the upper hand against anyone they face, even if said opponent is one of their oldest friends and teammates. Indeed, with the X-Men being notably prone to either turning evil or being made to do evil acts, this seems less a morally void move and more a strategic one, made to ensure that the name of mutant kind isn't damaged by any single rogue agent. Number 2. Using his powers to succeed, the X-Men number 12. Back when Xavier was younger and slightly more lawless, we were provided with a glorious storyline that saw the young psychic using his powers in order to cheat at school. Showing just how immoral Professor X could have been with his whole life, Charles would get top grades by reading his teacher's mind, be a pro athlete by telepathically learning the other team's tactics, and an all-round great guy by totally misusing his powers. It's an especially interesting tactic, as this method of outsmarting people is one that Xavier now largely avoids due to his moral concerns about invading other people's minds. Number 1. Making the Xavier Academy, X-Men number 1. Without Xavier's school for gifted youngsters, the Marvel Universe would be a substantially different place, one where mutants would be more feared and more dangerous due to them not being able to train and understand their powers safely. With Professor X's main goal in life being to ensure a peaceful coexistence between humanity and mutant kind, the Xavier Academy is the smartest move he could have possibly made. Not only does it undermine prejudice towards mutants by showing that people with powers can be heroes, but it also ensures that mutants struggling with the hatred they get for their powers aren't radicalized into trying to wipe out humanity. As much as Charles Xavier is one of the smartest X-Men, he is also one of the kindest, and these come together nowhere as clearly as in his decision to better the world one student at a time. And there you have it, folks. 10 times Professor X outsmarted everyone. Feel free to drop this video a like if you enjoyed it, and catch up with me on Twitter at YouSlyDogU. I'm Will for What Culture. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you next time.